Each night, just as the wind began to settle and the desert cooled, Father Elijah Cross lit a single candle inside the chapel. It was a quiet ritual, repeated without fail, even when no one came. The flame flickered on the altar, casting long shadows on the wooden pews and over the cracked image of the crucifix above. Outside, Red Hollow lay under a thin layer of dust, its people swallowed by silence and the hard life of the frontier. Elijah sat alone in the front pew, hands clasped, eyes distant. He whispered prayers not from faith, but from memory, repeating the words like steps down a long-forgotten path. There had been days when the chapel had been full, when children laughed in the aisles and bells rang loud enough to chase the coyotes back into the hills. But that time was gone. The war had taken most of them. Disease took more. Those who remained barely had hope left to give. If you're drawn to stories of mystery, redemption, and unforgettable characters, don't forget to subscribe. These tales ride deep into the heart of the frontier. The night air slipped through the chapel's wooden slats as Elijah stood to extinguish the candle. But when he opened the door, he froze. There, at the foot of the chapel steps, sat a girl. She couldn't have been more than 9, barefoot, her dress torn at the hem, and a wide-brimmed hat too large for her head sat crooked on her tangled hair. Her face was pale under the moonlight, cheeks streaked with dust, but her eyes, those wide, silent eyes, were fixed on him with an intensity that halted his breath. Elijah stepped forward. "Evening, child," he said gently. No reply. He crouched, careful not to startle her. "Are you hurt? Lost?" Still nothing. She didn't flinch, didn't move, only blinked once, slow and tired. Her arms were wrapped tightly around something held close to her chest. Elijah reached out, then paused. "You're safe now," he said, softer. "Come inside, it's cold." At last, the girl rose, wordless. She followed him up the steps, one hand trailing the edge of the wood as if memorizing the texture. Inside, she stopped just past the threshold, eyes locked on the single candle still burning. Elijah watched her gaze and didn't move to snuff it out. Instead, he lit another, then another. The small light grew, casting warmth into the still air. She sat near the altar, legs crossed, still silent. Elijah didn't press. He only sat nearby, watching her watch the flame. There were no words spoken, but something had shifted. After so many nights of empty pews and whispered prayers to no one, there was someone here. And for the first time in years, the candlelight didn't feel lonely. By morning, the girl had not spoken a word. She sat quietly near the chapel's front pew, clutching what Elijah now saw was a small scorched locket. Its chain was broken, and the metal blackened as though pulled from fire. She wouldn't let it go, not even to eat the bread and dried apple slices he set beside her. Elijah watched her from the doorway, coffee cooling in his hand. The town stirred beyond the chapel walls, horses braying, a hammer striking wood, a cough echoing from the saloon. Life continued, indifferent, but something about the girl's stillness felt like a storm waiting behind her eyes. He needed help. Crossing the dirt lane, he found Miriam Reed sweeping the steps of the schoolhouse. Her auburn hair was pinned back, and though her face wore the years plainly, her eyes had lost none of their steel. "Miriam," Elijah said. She looked up, guarded. "Father Cross." "There's a girl," he began. "Found her on the chapel steps last night, doesn't speak." Miriam hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come inside." The schoolhouse smelled of chalk and dust. Elijah explained what little he knew. Miriam listened without interrupting, arms folded. When he finished, she tapped her finger on the desk. "There was talk," she said. "A wagon burned out near the canyon last week. Sheriff Briggs went to look, said the scene was bad, real bad." Elijah frowned. "You think she came from there? She might be the only one who did." The words hung in the room like smoke. Back at the chapel, Miriam approached the girl slowly. "Hello, sweetheart," she said gently. "My name's Miriam. Can I sit with you?" The girl didn't answer, but didn't pull away either. Miriam crouched beside her, studying the locket. "That yours?" The girl clutched it tighter. "She's been silent since she arrived," Elijah said. Miriam stood. It's not just silence, that's trauma. She's seen something. Elijah's jaw tightened. Then we protect her. Later that day, the sheriff came. Duncan Briggs was a tall man with a stiff gait and eyes like old lead. He removed his hat and stepped into the chapel with quiet respect. He looked at the girl, then at Elijah. "Found her, did you?" "She found me," Briggs nodded slowly. "That fire out near the ridge. Families burned in their sleep. Someone lit that blaze on purpose." Elijah stiffened. "What does she have to do with it?" Briggs looked at the locket. "Maybe nothing, or maybe everything." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Some fires burn too quietly, Father. Can't till they don't." And with that, he walked out, dust curling in his wake. Elijah returned to the pew where the girl sat, the locket now hidden in her dress. She didn't look up, but her eyes were wide open. The days that followed settled into a rhythm, quiet, tentative and fragile. The girl never left Elijah's side. Wherever he went, she followed. To the well behind the chapel, to the small garden near the cemetery, even into the confessional where she sat curled beside the booth while he recited psalms to empty space. She remained mute, but her presence spoke of something old and unspoken, a wound wrapped in stillness. At night Elijah would light the candle as he always had. But now there were 2 chairs at the front of the chapel. She sat in one, legs swinging, eyes fixed on the flame. One morning, as he swept the dust from the floorboards, Elijah glanced toward her. She stood beside the altar, tiny fingers tracing patterns in the wood, circles, crosses, faint lines, a habit perhaps, or a memory. That afternoon, while Elijah fetched water, he found her staring into the distance beyond the chapel fence. There were boot prints in the sand, fresh, deep and wide set. Not his, not hers. Too recent to ignore. He looked around. Nothing but scrub brush and wind. Still, the feeling prickled down his spine. Red Hollow was no stranger to strangers, but these prints felt wrong. Like someone had come close and waited. That night, Elijah dreamed. He was back in uniform, gunpowder in the air, desert night broken by fire and screaming. A field hospital, a tent, blood on linen, his daughter's face, pale and cold. He woke with sweat on his brow, heart pounding. The girl sat nearby, awake, watching him. Her small hands still clutched the locket. "You remind me of her," he whispered. "I had a daughter once. Emma." The girl said nothing, but her fingers loosened slightly on the chain. By morning, Elijah went into town for supplies. At the general store, he asked for wax, bandages, and tea. As the shopkeeper wrapped his order, Elijah noticed something behind the counter. A necklace, a twin to the girl's locket, but newer, shinier. "Where'd that come from?" he asked. The shopkeeper shrugged. "Traded it 2 days ago. Stranger paid with it for whiskey and a Bible." Elijah's breath caught. Stranger. Didn't catch his name. Long coat, wide hat, didn't say much. Elijah returned to the chapel quickly. The girl was still there, waiting. When he entered, she stood and walked straight to him, as if she sensed something in his face. He knelt beside her. "You saw who did it, didn't you?" She looked away toward the candle. He didn't press, but he felt it now. There was a path opening, lined with ash and memory. And it would not be easy to walk. The prints had faded in the wind. But the threat had not. Someone had come close. A storm rolled in 2 nights later, sudden and fierce. Lightning split the horizon, and thunder shook the chapel walls. Elijah moved quickly to close the shutters, but the girl was already on the floor, curled beneath the pews, trembling. He knelt beside her. "It's just thunder," he said gently. But her hands were pressed to her ears, eyes squeezed shut, breath ragged. She rocked slightly as if trying to vanish into the wood. Then she began to scratch, not herself, but the pew. With a shard of broken pottery, she dragged sharp lines across the surface, her movements frantic. Elijah reached to stop her, but paused when he saw the shape forming beneath her hand. A cross, encircled by a crown of thorns. Elijah stared. The mark was crude but unmistakable. By morning, she sat quiet again, as though nothing had happened. The symbol remained etched into the pew. Elijah showed it to Miriam that afternoon. She went pale. "I've seen that before," she said, voice low. "Out near the old mining camp, painted on rocks, carved into trees. Sheriff said it was nonsense, old stories. But I knew better." Elijah waited. "It's the mark of Jericho Crow." The name felt like a crack in the air. "Jericho?" Elijah asked. "Used to be a preacher. War messed with his head. Started gathering folks in the hills, people broken, lost. Told them the world was ending and only fire would cleanse it." Elijah exhaled. "You think he's the one who burned that wagon?" "I think he's the one who burned a dozen homes across 3 counties. And if this girl carries his mark, he's looking for her." Back at the chapel, Elijah found her sitting on the step, watching the sun fall behind the hills. He brought her a cup of milk. She took it, eyes softening. That evening, as the first stars appeared, she smiled. It was fleeting, small, almost uncertain, but it was there. Elijah felt something stir in his chest. He hadn't seen a smile like that in years. Not since Emma. Not since the war took everything. He sat beside the girl, both of them wrapped in silence and starlight. For once it didn't feel like emptiness. Then, footsteps. A figure passed near the edge of town, moving slow, as if surveying. Long coat, dark hat, the shape of a book clutched in one hand. He didn't look toward the chapel, but Elijah felt it. Someone was watching. When he turned back to the girl, she had lowered her head, the smile gone. She held the locket close, fingers trembling. Elijah stood slowly, heart heavy. He would speak with Briggs in the morning. The candlelight inside still burned, but the shadows outside were beginning to stir. Sheriff Briggs confirmed it the next morning. The stranger had asked about a child, blonde, quiet, traveling alone. Said he was a cousin searching for family, but the words hadn't matched the eyes. "Cold," Briggs said, like he didn't care if he found her or found a corpse. Elijah's gut twisted. "And you let him go?" "He didn't break the law," Briggs answered. "Not yet." Back at the chapel, Elijah found the girl sketching in the dirt with a piece of charcoal. She sat cross-legged beside the garden, head tilted, focused. He knelt beside her and froze. Drawn with uncanny detail was the face of the man Elijah had seen near the edge of town. The same long coat, same hollow eyes. "You saw him?" Elijah asked. The girl didn't look up, only nodded once. He brought the drawing to Miriam. "She shouldn't be able to draw like this," Miriam whispered, fingers tracing the lines. "Not at her age." "She's remembering," Elijah said, "not inventing." That night, the chapel felt smaller, the shadows deeper. Elijah boarded the back window and kept a rifle close by. The girl slept curled beside the altar, wrapped in a quilt. He didn't sleep. At dawn, Briggs returned with news. "Stranger's gone," he said. "Rode out east, or so folks say, but tracks near the chapel say otherwise." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he wasn't alone. And someone's circling your little sanctuary." Elijah clenched his jaw. "She stays here." "Then you better be ready to defend her." Briggs handed him a revolver. 6 rounds. Make them count." When he left, Elijah sat on the chapel steps. The girl came beside him, silent as ever. He looked down at her. "You know they're coming, don't you?" She stared ahead, then gently placed her hand on his. It was small, fragile, but steady. Elijah nodded slowly. "You're not alone anymore." That night, he lit 3 candles instead of 1, and for the first time since the war, he prayed not for the dead, but for the living. He didn't ask for miracles, he asked for courage. Elijah hadn't heard Jericho Crow's name in nearly 20 years, but when it came back, it hit like a bullet through bone. Crow had once worn the same uniform, slept under the same stars. They'd prayed together in foxholes, bled on the same battlegrounds. But war doesn't end for everyone. For Jericho, it had only transformed. Elijah remembered the last time he saw him, after the fire at Gettysburg, eyes wild, muttering scripture twisted backward. He had disappeared into the wilderness, taking a handful of broken men with him. Most thought he'd died. But monsters don't die. They wait. Miriam arrived with a letter that afternoon. It had no seal, no name. Just a single sentence in a spidery, elegant script. "Return what's mine or I take what's yours." Elijah's hands trembled as he read it. Miriam said nothing, but he saw the fear in her eyes. She knew, like he did, this wasn't a threat. It was a promise. He burned the letter in the candle flame. Later, while tending the garden with the girl, Elijah noticed how she watched the horizon. Not in fear, but in awareness, as if she sensed something neither of them could see. "You remember more than you let on," he said softly. She didn't respond, but she reached out and placed a small, flat stone in his hand. On it, scratched faintly, was that same cross within thorns. She had carved it with her fingernails. Elijah looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw something buried deep beneath the silence. Not just pain, not just memory, recognition. When the sun fell, a chill settled over Red Hollow. That night, the chapel was defaced. Someone had carved a crude verse across the outer wall. "The fire comes for the faithful." Elijah stood before it in the moonlight, jaw clenched. He didn't call for Briggs. He didn't run. He lit the candles inside, every single one. Miriam arrived in the dark, carrying a small pistol and a satchel of supplies. She didn't ask. She just placed them on the altar and sat beside the girl, who leaned gently into her side. They were preparing for something unspeakable. Just before dawn, thunder rumbled again, but this time, it wasn't the sky. The girl woke with a jolt, eyes wide, her lips parted. She whispered one word, her voice thin and dry like wind across stone. "Fire." Elijah froze. Miriam stared. But the girl didn't speak again. She simply turned to the altar and knelt, eyes fixed on the flickering light, as if praying to something only she could see. Elijah felt it in his bones. Jericho wasn't coming. He was already here. Elijah bolted the chapel doors before the sun fully rose. The hammering of nails echoed through the hollow wood like distant gunfire. Every window was shuttered. The rifle lay across the altar now, not hidden. The girl watched him with wide, solemn eyes, but said nothing more. He wasn't building a sanctuary, he was building a last stand. Miriam brought canned food, clean cloth, and a knife. She placed it without a word, her lips drawn tight. They both understood. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't come gently. Sheriff Briggs stopped by one last time. "They're near," he said. "Riders spotted on the south ridge. 6, maybe more. They haven't come into town. Not yet." "Jericho?" Elijah asked. Briggs nodded grimly. "Looks like him. Long coat, preaching fire." Elijah's stomach turned. "You still sure about staying?" "She's not going anywhere," Elijah said. Briggs sighed, handed him a small pouch of bullets. "Then God help you." When the sheriff left, Elijah lit every candle in the chapel again, dozens of them now, flickering like stars in a desperate sky. That night, as the wind stirred dry leaves across the porch, Elijah sat with the girl beside him and told her a truth he had never spoken aloud. "I had a daughter," he said. "Emma. I left her once, in a place I thought was safe. I was wrong. When I came back, there was nothing left, just ash." His voice cracked. He gripped his hands together tightly. "I thought serving here would fix something. That maybe if I lit a candle every night someone would hear. But I wasn't praying for them, I was begging to forget." The girl reached out and placed her tiny hand on his. "I won't leave you," he whispered. She leaned against his side. Later, with night draped thick across the land, the candles burned low. Elijah took a small basin of water and approached the altar. He called Miriam to stand beside him. The girl stepped forward. Elijah dipped his hand, letting the water run through his fingers. "You don't need words," he said softly. "Not for this." He looked into her eyes. "Do you want a name?" She nodded. "Then we will call you Hope." The water touched her brow. She blinked, then closed her eyes. Behind them, the chapel groaned under a gust of wind. But inside, for that moment, there was stillness. Later, Elijah climbed the bell tower with a spyglass. 6 riders, dust trailing behind them like smoke. The crimson psalm had arrived. He descended, face pale but resolute. "They'll be here by dawn." No one spoke. In the flickering light, the girl sat beside the altar, hands folded. Elijah knelt and whispered, "Whatever happens, you're not alone." And this time he believed it. At first light, the chapel bell rang once, long, hollow, defiant. It wasn't a call to worship. It was a warning. The crimson psalm rode in with slow, deliberate steps. 6 men and 1 leader. Jericho Crow at the front, clad in a faded cassock, his long hair swept by the wind like the remnants of a fallen angel. A rusted crucifix hung from his neck, swinging gently as if counting down. They dismounted just outside the chapel fence. Inside, Elijah stood with the rifle in hand. Miriam took her position near the window, pistol ready. Sheriff Briggs had returned under the cover of dark, and now crouched by the door with a shotgun across his lap. The girl sat hidden behind the altar, silent but watching. Crow stepped forward. "Elijah," he called out, voice smooth, almost kind. "I never imagined we'd meet in a house of God again." Elijah opened the doors wide, stepping out onto the threshold. "You brought hell with you last time. I won't let you do it again." Crow smiled. "You took something, brother." "She came to me," Elijah replied. "She's mine," Crow said. "Chosen, promised by fire. She's a child. She's the spark, and the world is dry." Crow lifted his hand, and the first shot rang out. Gunfire erupted, tearing through silence and wood. Briggs returned fire, sending one of the cultists sprawling into the dust. Miriam dropped another at the window. The chapel groaned under the onslaught. Glass shattered, pews splintered. Elijah ducked behind the altar, shielding the girl with his body. "Stay down," he breathed. Crow's voice echoed above the chaos. "You're trying to stop the flood with a candle, Elijah." Elijah rose, fired once, missed, fired again, hit the shoulder of the man reloading near the well. A scream. More smoke. The sound of boots charging. Then, silence. Jericho walked straight through the chapel doors, unarmed, hands raised. Elijah aimed the rifle at his chest. "Stop." Jericho didn't. "I should have left you in the mud." "You did," Jericho said, "but I crawled out." They stood face to face now, memories between them like ghosts. Blood, betrayal, fire. "She doesn't belong to you," Elijah said. Jericho smiled sadly. Neither did Emma. Elijah froze. "You left her once," Jericho whispered. "You'll do it again." And in that instant, the girl stepped from behind the altar. She held the sheriff's revolver in both hands. She aimed and fired. Jericho staggered, mouth open, blood blooming across his chest. He looked down, then up, shocked as if he hadn't believed it possible. She didn't tremble. He fell to his knees, then to the ground, silent. Elijah rushed to her, catching the gun before it slipped from her grip. She stared at the body, then at him. Tears welled but did not fall. The candles still burned, and outside the remaining riders fled into the dust, leaving their preacher behind. Jericho lay sprawled across the chapel floor, blood pooling beneath his chest, soaking into the boards. The gunshot had silenced everything. No wind, no footsteps, not even the birds dared sing. Elijah knelt beside him. The once charismatic preacher's lips parted, breath shallow. His eyes, dimming, locked onto Elijah's. "She wasn't yours to save," Jericho whispered. Then nothing. No cry. No curse. Just stillness. Outside, the last of the Crimson Psalm riders vanished into the horizon. Sheriff Briggs limped after them but didn't fire. He knew a storm had passed, and what remained was not for bullets. Inside, Elijah turned to the girl. She stood rigid, face pale, fists clenched at her sides. He reached for her, unsure. Her lips parted. "I didn't want to," she said, voice rough, unused but strong. Elijah froze. "Hope." She looked at him. "But I had to." He held her, and for the first time, she let herself fall into his arms. Miriam approached quietly, wrapping a blanket around the girl. It's over. Elijah shook his head. No, but it's beginning. The aftermath was slow. Townsfolk emerged from their homes cautious. No one asked questions. Some helped repair the chapel doors, others swept the broken glass. Word spread fast. Jericho Crow was dead. By sundown, Briggs returned. Cults scattered, he reported. Some will regroup, some will disappear. We'll keep watch. He looked at Hope, now sitting in the front pew, hands resting on her lap. She's stronger than we thought. Elijah nodded. She's stronger than any of us. Later, as dusk settled, the chapel glowed with warm candlelight. The floor had been scrubbed. Jericho's body buried at the edge of the graveyard, marked by a plain wooden cross. Hope sat beside Elijah, staring at the flickering flame on the altar. I remember the fire, she said softly. I remember screaming. My mama hid me in the wagon. She didn't come back. Elijah reached for her hand. She saved me, Hope whispered. And you waited. He looked down, throat thick. I should have waited for Emma, but I won't fail again. Hope leaned her head against his arm. Don't leave me, she said. I won't, Elijah replied. And this time it wasn't a vow made in desperation. It was a promise forged in fire. Weeks passed. The desert wind softened. The sky, once sullen and grey, began to open with colour at dawn, and in the heart of Red Hollow, the chapel stood whole again. The front doors were newly painted, the glass windows repaired with careful hands. But more than that, the place breathed. Children's laughter echoed in the afternoons. Women brought flowers to the steps. The pews filled again, not with sermons of fire and wrath, but with quiet hope. Elijah lit the candle each evening still, but he was never alone. Hope stood beside him now, holding the taper steady, her gaze calm. Her voice had returned, cautious but clear, growing stronger with every word she dared. Miriam reopened the schoolhouse with Hope as her shadow and eager assistant. The girl had taken to reading quickly, devouring books like bread. She smiled more now, real smiles, and sometimes she laughed. Elijah watched her from the chapel window one morning, chalk dust on her hands, teaching a younger child to spell mercy. He never said it aloud, but he knew. That was the miracle he'd prayed for all along. At the edge of town, Sheriff Briggs kept his watch. He never spoke of Jericho again, and neither did the others. But they knew. The fear had faded. The scar remained. One evening, after the last candle was lit and the pews were empty, Hope stood beside Elijah at the altar. Do you think they're watching us? She asked. Mama, Emma? Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder. I think they never stopped. They knelt together, not in silence, but in shared breath, shared strength. The chapel was no longer a tomb of memories. It was a place reborn. Outside, the stars began to bloom across the sky. A breeze rustled the chapel's new bell, its tone gentle and clear. Elijah stepped to the door, looked out at the town he once believed had forgotten how to hope. But he saw it now. In every lit window, in every small kindness, in every child's voice carried by the wind. The fire had come, but it hadn't consumed them. It had revealed what was worth saving. And now a final word to those who walked this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of resilience, redemption, and the quiet strength that carries us through darkness. And before you go, click the video on your screen to continue exploring the frontier with us. There's always another story waiting in the dust. And always another candle to be lit.